Beneath the most photographed monument on the planet, there may be a machine hidden from view. That, at least, is the extraordinary claim that emerged in March 2025, when 4 satellites reportedly scanned through nearly half a mile of solid rock and revealed something beneath the Khafre pyramid for the very first time. Before you dismiss the idea, stay with me for a moment. In the next few minutes, you'll see exactly what researchers claim they discovered beneath the Khafre pyramid, why one of the world's best-known archaeologists publicly labeled the findings fake within just 72 hours, and why the team behind the scans argues that the pyramids visible on the surface are merely the capstone of something much larger below. Most visitors who arrive at Giza spend their time looking up. They stand beneath the blazing sun, take photographs of 3 limestone pyramids against the desert sky, and leave believing they have witnessed the entirety of the site. To them, these structures are royal tombs, ancient wonders, and perhaps the greatest achievements of the ancient world. Yet for more than 2 centuries, the feature that has fascinated engineers most was never what stood above ground. It was whatever might exist beneath it. Then, in 2025, a research team largely ignored by mainstream Egyptology directed a new form of radar analysis toward the second pyramid and announced something that seemed impossible. According to their findings, the underground chambers extend nearly 2,000 feet downward. They reported the presence of 8 vertical shafts. Beneath those shafts, they claimed to have identified enormous cube-shaped chambers large enough to contain an entire stadium. Even more controversial was their conclusion that the arrangement resembled a device far more than it resembled a burial complex. This is the story of what researchers claim lies beneath the pyramids of Giza. Not myths or legends, but the data, the dates, the depths, the measurements, the controversy, and one puzzling detail that neither side of the debate has been able to fully explain. If buried history fascinates you as much as it fascinates me, consider subscribing and turning on notifications before we descend into this mystery, because stories like this have a way of quietly fading from public attention. To understand the controversy, we first need to examine the structure at the center of it all, because this is not an imaginary monument. It is a real pyramid with a real history and a real name. The structure in question is the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest of the 3 great pyramids standing on the Giza Plateau west of Cairo along the western bank of the Nile River. It was constructed for Pharaoh Khafre, who ruled Egypt sometime between approximately 2558 and 2532 BCE. That places the monument at roughly 4,500 years old. Today, the pyramid rises to about 136 meters in height. Each side of its base measures more than 200 meters, and its faces climb at an angle of roughly 53 degrees. For most of recorded history, scholars believed its purpose was straightforward. A pharaoh died, an immense stone monument was erected above his remains, and the story ended there. The problem is that the evidence has never fit that explanation as neatly as many assume. The burial chamber associated with Khafre, the one visitors can actually enter, sits low within the structure near its base. Yet the chamber is empty. The sarcophagus was discovered already open. There was no treasure. There was no mummy. There were no elaborate inscriptions covering the walls as seen in many later Egyptian tombs. For a monument that demanded decades of labor and the effort of an entire nation to construct, its interior feels strangely sparse, almost intentionally so. At times, it creates the impression that the chamber we found was never intended to be the structure's true focal point. And this would not be the first time Khafre's pyramid refused to surrender its secrets. In 1968, Nobel Prize-winning physicist Luis Alvarez arrived at Giza with an ambitious plan. Using spark chambers and cosmic ray muons, he attempted to peer through the pyramid in much the same way that medical X-rays allow doctors to see inside the human body. Alvarez was widely regarded as one of the most brilliant experimental physicists of the 20th century. He had access to world-class equipment and cutting-edge technology. Despite all of that, he found nothing. No hidden chambers appeared in the data. No concealed networks emerged from the scans. The pyramid offered no answers. For decades afterward, many took that silence as evidence that there was simply nothing there to discover. But failing to detect something is not the same as proving it does not exist. It only meant that the available technology had reached its limits. Whatever secrets the pyramid may have contained remained hidden for another 57 years. The broader setting matters as well. Giza is not a single monument standing alone in a sea of sand. The plateau west of Cairo contains roughly 10 pyramids, with the three giants, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, dominating the landscape. The site also includes temples, ceremonial causeways, vast cemetery fields known as mastabas, and the Great Sphinx watching over the complex from its edge. Everything rests upon a shelf of remarkably pure limestone, considered some of the finest building stone available in ancient Egypt. Three major quarries existed on the plateau itself, each supplying material to one of the Great Pyramids. This was far more than a construction project. It was a carefully engineered landscape. Every alignment, every pathway, every angle, and every structure appears to have been positioned with deliberate intent. Whoever designed the complex clearly possessed a deep understanding of the bedrock beneath their feet, perhaps far greater than modern observers have traditionally acknowledged. For many years, archaeologists dismissed suggestions of vast hidden structures beneath the plateau as little more than treasure-hunting fantasies. After all, Giza had been mapped, surveyed, excavated, drilled, and examined more thoroughly than almost any archaeological site on Earth. According to the prevailing view, there was simply nothing left to find. That was the official position. Then the technology evolved. In March 2025, a team consisting of Corrado Malanga from the University of Pisa, radar specialist Filippo Biondi of the University of Strathclyde in Scotland, and explorer Armando May held a press conference that ignited a debate still ongoing today. They had not excavated the site. They had not drilled into the pyramid. Egyptian law prohibits such invasive methods because the pyramids are protected monuments, and only non-destructive investigative techniques are currently allowed on the plateau. Instead, the team turned to satellites. More specifically, they employed a method they describe as synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography. Synthetic aperture radar, often called SAR, is not a new technology. For years it has been used from orbit to map terrain, locate underground resources, and assist in identifying deposits of oil, gas, water, and minerals. What the researchers added was the Doppler component. As radar signals pass over an area, tiny natural vibrations within the ground, caused by subtle seismic activity and microscopic movements in the rock, produce extremely small shifts in the returning signal frequency. By collecting enough of these frequency changes from multiple angles and combining them into a single model, researchers claim they can reconstruct a three-dimensional image of what lies below the surface. The team compared the process to sonar mapping. The difference is that instead of charting the floor of an ocean, the system is attempting to map structures hidden deep within solid stone. And according to their interpretation, some of those structures may extend nearly half a mile underground. One aspect of the study that the researchers emphasized repeatedly involved data verification. They did not rely on a single satellite system. According to Biondi, the analysis incorporated information from 4 independent satellite networks, including Italy's Cosmoskymed constellation and the commercial satellite system operated by Capella Space. He stated that all 4 datasets revealed the same formations appearing in the same locations. In his view, that consistency was the strongest argument in favor of taking the results seriously. A single unusual reading could be dismissed as an equipment error. One reading might simply be a glitch. When 4 independent systems all identify the same hidden geometry beneath the ground, that becomes much harder to dismiss than a single unusual reading. During the later stages of their analysis, the researchers took another step that would ultimately fuel both support and criticism. Rather than relying solely on human interpretation of the radar imagery, they incorporated artificial intelligence to help identify patterns and structures buried within the data. To the team, this reduced the possibility of researchers seeing what they wanted to see. In their view, the AI acted as a filter against human bias and wishful thinking. Critics saw the situation very differently. They argued that introducing artificial intelligence added a black box to the process, one capable of finding patterns that do not actually exist, turning random noise into seemingly meaningful structures. That disagreement sits at the heart of the entire controversy. Either the machine discovered evidence of a machine, or the machine created the illusion of one. We will come back to that question. Because what the researchers claim to have found is the reason this story became global news. According to the team, 3 major discoveries beneath the Khafre pyramid transform what appears to be a simple mass of stone into something that looks remarkably engineered. The first finding sounds almost unremarkable at first, until you understand its scale. The first clue is the shafts. Researchers reported the existence of 8 enormous vertical structures beneath the pyramid. These were described as cylindrical voids descending straight downward into the bedrock. Not angled tunnels. Not collapsed corridors. Not irregular natural cavities. Instead, they appeared as 8 vertical columns arranged in what the team described as a highly symmetrical and deliberate pattern, extending hundreds of meters into the plateau. Even more intriguing was their claim that these structures were not isolated to Khafre alone. According to their interpretation, similar relationships appeared beneath all 3 major pyramids, suggesting that the monuments above might be connected to a single underground system. In that scenario, the pyramids themselves would not be the primary structures. They would merely serve as markers, or entrances, to something much larger below. The mainstream explanation for underground voids is far simpler. Limestone dissolves. Water moves through it. Over vast stretches of time, natural processes create caves, chambers, sinkholes, and irregular networks known as karst formations. Giza sits on limestone, and such geological activity occurs all over the world. The groundwater beneath the plateau is well documented, and water has influenced the landscape for millions of years. Yet supporters of the discovery point to what they see as a problem with that explanation. Natural cavities are rarely orderly. They twist and branch unpredictably, following fractures, weaknesses, and water pathways through the rock. They do not normally organize themselves into 8 matching vertical columns arranged beneath a carefully constructed monument. Then there is the detail that makes the reported structures even more unusual. The team claimed that each shaft appeared to be wrapped by a spiral formation, resembling a pathway winding around the outside as it descended. Erosion may create caves and voids. But a spiral pattern suggests planning. A spiral suggests design. That is why the shafts became the first major point of controversy. The second clue lies even deeper. According to the researchers, the 8 shafts do not simply disappear into darkness. Instead, they reportedly continue downward to a depth exceeding 3,500 feet before connecting to 2 enormous cube-shaped chambers. The dimensions they proposed are staggering. Each chamber was estimated to measure roughly 80 meters on every side, approximately 260 feet. To visualize that scale, a single chamber of those dimensions would contain a volume larger than many modern sports venues. If such structures truly exist, they would represent immense hollow spaces carved beneath more than half a kilometer of solid rock. And that immediately raises difficult questions. No known ancient technology could remove that amount of material without leaving evidence on the surface equivalent to a quarry of extraordinary size. This is where skeptics urge caution. Radar imaging at extreme depths remains highly controversial. Many specialists note that synthetic aperture radar performs exceptionally well near the surface but becomes increasingly uncertain as researchers attempt to interpret deeper geological layers. That criticism is important. Yet even critics acknowledge one point. If the reported geometry is accurate, it would be difficult to explain naturally. A hollow cube with flat walls and right angles is not something normally created by erosion. Crystals can form geometric faces. Nature can create impressive structures. But an empty chamber shaped like an 80-meter cube is something else entirely. From that perspective, only two possibilities exist. Either the data is incorrect, or the structure is artificial. Supporters of the discovery argue that there is no meaningful middle ground. In their view, someone either built a chamber the size of a stadium thousands of feet beneath the desert, or the radar interpretation is fundamentally wrong. The research team has made it clear which explanation they believe. That brings us to the third clue, the one that shifted the debate away from archaeology and into a completely different territory. The turning point came from Filippo Biondi, the radar engineer behind the project. When asked what purpose the spiral shafts might serve, he did not describe them as burial spaces. He did not suggest storage rooms. Instead, he spoke about information. Then he expanded on the idea. Biondi argued that energy itself can be understood as a form of information and that information is fundamental to how systems function. His language suggested a network designed to process, store, or manipulate something rather than simply house the remains of a ruler. One particular statement quickly spread across the internet. He described the pyramids as the tip of the iceberg. In another comparison, he referred to them as a lid or a cap placed over a much larger structure hidden below. According to that interpretation, the visible monument is not the main feature. The true substance lies underground. That idea immediately connected with a much older debate. For more than 2 centuries, a small group of engineers, researchers, and independent thinkers have argued that the Great Pyramids may have served a purpose beyond burial. They point to the structure's extraordinary precision, their alignment, their unusual granite-lined passages, and their acoustically resonant chambers. Figures ranging from inventor Nikola Tesla to modern engineer Christopher Dunn have suggested that the pyramids functioned as machines, resonators, power systems, or devices designed to interact with energy in ways we do not fully understand. For most of that time, however, such theories lacked one critical element. They had no mechanism. Everything depended on interpreting the visible architecture. If the 2025 scans are accurate, supporters argue that they finally provide what those theories were missing. Instead of a machine without an engine, they now have an alleged engine hidden beneath the surface. At this point, ancient stories begin to echo modern claims. Egyptian traditions speak of hidden chambers beneath sacred ground, repositories of preserved wisdom associated with Thoth, the god of writing, knowledge, and learning. These legendary locations are often referred to as the halls of Amenti or the Hall of Records. For centuries, such accounts were generally viewed as mythology, symbolism, or religious metaphor. The research team drew a direct connection. Their spokesperson stated that the structures detected beneath the plateau showed a strong resemblance to descriptions of those legendary halls and specifically referenced Thoth. Interpret that however you choose. But the comparison is difficult to ignore. Ancient traditions describe hidden chambers of knowledge beneath Giza. Modern radar interpretations claim to reveal vast hidden chambers beneath Giza. A skeptic sees coincidence. An investigator wonders whether mythology preserved a distant memory of something real. And that leads to an unavoidable question. Why would anyone build such a structure? Why create spiral pathways around vertical shafts? Why construct 8 matching columns descending to the same depth? Why connect them to 2 enormous chambers buried far below the surface? A royal tomb requires none of those features. A tomb needs only a chamber and a means of access. That reasoning has fueled the machine theory for generations. Supporters point out that the pyramids contain granite transported from quarries hundreds of miles away. Granite is also a piezoelectric material, meaning it can generate small electrical charges when subjected to pressure or vibration. They note that certain chambers possess unusual acoustic properties and can resonate at specific frequencies. They point to the remarkable alignment of the pyramid complex with the cardinal directions, achieved with an accuracy that exceeds what many would expect from the ancient world. None of those characteristics are necessary simply to bury a king. Yet they could be relevant if the structure were intended to resonate, conduct energy, or performs some other functional role. Biondi's comments about information seem to echo the language used by generations of engineers who viewed the pyramids as more than tombs. Not a monument. Not a grave. But a system. Something designed to perform work. At this point, however, we need to do something many discussions of this topic avoid. We need to examine the criticism with the same seriousness as the claim. And the backlash was immediate. Within days of the announcement, one of Egyptology's most influential figures publicly responded. That figure was Zahi Hawass. For decades, Hawass has overseen major excavations throughout Giza and has become one of the most recognizable voices in Egyptian archaeology. His influence within the field is difficult to overstate. And he did not respond cautiously. He rejected the claims outright. According to Hawass, the announcement was completely incorrect and lacked any legitimate scientific foundation. He stated that Egyptian authorities had not granted the researchers permission to conduct work in or around the pyramid and challenged the methods described in the presentation. He also argued that the technique being discussed was neither validated nor approved for making the kinds of claims being presented. Most importantly, he insisted that the alleged structures could not have been detected using the method described. In another statement, he summarized his position in two blunt words. Fake news. The uncomfortable reality is that some of his objections carry significant weight. The first issue is obvious. At the time the story spread across the internet, no peer-reviewed scientific paper had been published presenting the findings. The announcement arrived through a press conference, online videos, and media releases rather than through the normal scientific review process. Then there is the question of depth. Independent radar specialists have repeatedly noted that SAR technology becomes increasingly uncertain when attempting to interpret dense geological structures far below the surface. Yet the researchers were claiming to identify detailed geometric features thousands of feet underground. That is an extraordinary assertion. There is also the issue of the people making the claim. Corrado Malanga, the project's lead researcher, is not known primarily as an Egyptologist. He has spent years associated with UFO research and other highly unconventional topics. Critics quickly highlighted that history and used it to question the credibility of the project. The controversy intensified further when members of the team suggested that some of the detected formations might be as old as 38,000 years. Such a date would overturn much of the accepted timeline of human civilization. Yet no excavated evidence currently exists to support that possibility. Which brings us to the question that discussions like this often avoid asking directly. So, does any of this actually prove that an ancient machine is buried beneath the pyramids of Egypt? No. The honest answer is no. The most dramatic version of this story, the buried power plant, the underground engine, the lost high technology of a forgotten civilization, has not been proven. At the moment, those conclusions rest on a radar technique that has not yet completed the peer review process, applied at depths where the method faces its greatest challenges. The claims also come from a team whose credibility has been questioned by critics, and not a single chamber has been physically verified through excavation. Those are serious limitations. Yet there is another side to this discussion, and it is the reason the story refuses to disappear. Even the most cautious, conservative interpretation of Giza has become increasingly difficult to explain away. The 2025 Khafre claims did not emerge in isolation. They arrived after a decade of legitimate, peer-reviewed discoveries that all seem to point in the same direction. Downward. In 2017, the International Scan Pyramids project used muon tomography, a technique that tracks cosmic ray particles passing through matter, to examine the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The result was remarkable. Researchers identified a large hidden void located above the Grand Gallery, a discovery significant enough to be published in Nature and accepted by the wider scientific community. Then, in 2023, the same technology revealed another concealed feature. This time, researchers confirmed the existence of a previously unknown corridor approximately 30 feet long hidden behind the pyramid's northern face. Once again, the findings underwent peer review and entered the scientific literature. The surprises did not stop there. In 2024, archaeologists surveying the Western Cemetery near the Great Pyramid identified an unusual L-shaped anomaly measuring roughly 33 feet in length and buried around 6.5 feet beneath the surface. Below that feature, instruments detected a deeper structure exhibiting unusually high electrical resistance. The lead researcher, a specialist in electromagnetic sensing technologies, noted that such an L-shaped formation is not something natural geological processes normally create. Excavations at that location are ongoing. Then, in April 2025, another study added to the growing list. A joint German-Egyptian team employed radar, ultrasound, and electrical resistivity techniques to investigate the eastern face of the Pyramid of Menkaure, the smallest of Giza's three Great Pyramids. Their analysis revealed two previously unknown air-filled voids concealed behind unusually polished granite blocks. Some researchers suggested these spaces might be associated with a long-theorized secondary entrance to the monument. Unlike the controversial Khafre announcement, this study passed peer review and received a formal DOI, placing it firmly within the scientific record. It was not a viral internet claim. It became part of the published literature. There is another detail from the Italian team's report that often gets overshadowed by the more sensational headlines. In addition to the two giant cube-shaped chambers, they described 5 separate multi-level structures connected by passageways and positioned between the deep chambers and the surface. 5 structures. 8 shafts. 2 enormous halls. Regardless of what one believes about the radar's accuracy, that description does not resemble a single natural cave. It resembles a complex layout. It resembles architecture. And this is where the broader picture becomes difficult to ignore. Imagine removing the Italian team entirely from the discussion. Set aside every disputed claim about giant cubes, spiral shafts, and buried machines. Even then, the pattern remains. Year after year, scan after scan, researchers continue discovering unexpected voids, hidden corridors, unexplained spaces, and unusual anomalies throughout the Giza Plateau. Voids above known chambers. Corridors hidden behind stone faces. Features that challenge straightforward geological explanations. The ground beneath Giza is not a solid block of stone. It never was. At this point, the debate is no longer about whether hidden spaces exist. The debate is about how extensive they are and what created them. Even that restrained conclusion is extraordinary. Because if only a small portion of the reported underground structures turns out to be artificial, the implications would be profound. It would suggest that the pyramids were never self-contained monuments. Instead, they would be the visible portion of a much larger system. Like the tip of an iceberg rising above the ocean while the majority remains concealed below. Such a discovery would imply that the builders of Giza were not merely stacking stone upward. They were also shaping the bedrock beneath their feet on a scale that modern technology is only beginning to reveal. And whatever motivated that effort has been lost to history. The knowledge. The engineering. The purpose. All of it would remain largely unknown. In that context, the ancient stories take on a different tone. Legends describing hidden chambers, halls of records, the wisdom of Thoth, and preserved knowledge beneath sacred ground begin to sound less like fantasy and more like distant echoes of something forgotten. For centuries, such stories were dismissed as superstition. We assumed ancient people were simply telling symbolic tales. Yet generation after generation, those same traditions repeated a remarkably consistent idea. The important things were underground. Temple after temple. Story after story. The message remained the same. The answer lies below. Then, in 2025, 4 satellites examined that same ground and reported something unexpected beneath it. There is one final piece of the puzzle. And it may be the most controversial element of all. It concerns age. The Italian team did not limit themselves to describing structures. They also suggested a possible timeline. According to some of their interpretations, portions of the buried formations could be as old as 38,000 years. Pause for a moment and consider what that number means. The accepted age of the pyramids is approximately 4,500 years. A date of 38,000 years would place those underground structures tens of thousands of years before the pharaohs. Under that scenario, Khafre's builders would not have created the deep complex. They would have inherited it. They would have constructed their monuments above something already ancient beyond imagination. To be clear, there is currently no excavated evidence supporting that age estimate. None. Of all the claims made by the team, this may be the weakest. Yet it forces an important question into the open. If an engineered structure truly exists beneath Giza, then the mystery is not merely what it is. The mystery becomes who built it. And when. Was the civilization we associate with the pyramids the original creator? Or was it simply the latest culture to occupy and repurpose a much older site? Those questions strike at the foundation of accepted history. That is why mainstream archaeology approaches them with extreme caution. If such a scenario were ever proven, the conventional timeline would not require minor adjustments. It would require a complete rewrite. And that is precisely why the issue remains unresolved. So where does the situation actually stand today once we strip away the agendas, assumptions, and speculation? The Pyramid of Khafre is real. The satellite scans were conducted. The researchers continue to stand behind their findings. Prominent archaeologists reject those findings. No definitive peer-reviewed judgment has settled the matter. No excavation has verified the claims. Egyptian authorities have not authorized the kind of investigation required to confirm or disprove the alleged structures. For now, the shafts, spirals, chambers, and proposed underground network remain exactly where they have supposedly been for thousands of years. Untouched. Unconfirmed. Unexplained. And there is a practical reason why this situation is unlikely to change quickly. Modern Egyptian law places strict limits on destructive investigations at Giza. Those protections exist for good reason. The site is one of humanity's most valuable archaeological treasures. But those same protections also create a challenge. If researchers truly wanted to verify a chamber thousands of feet underground, the project would require enormous financial resources, government approval, international cooperation, and years of planning. This would not be a small archaeological dig. It would be a national undertaking. Consider that even the robotic exploration of sealed passages inside Khufu's pyramid required years of negotiation before a single hidden doorway could be examined. Reaching a disputed structure half a mile underground would be an entirely different scale of operation. For now, no government has chosen to authorize such an effort. As a result, the radar images remain suspended in a strange state. Too controversial for many experts to accept. Too intriguing for curious minds to ignore. And perhaps that is the most fascinating part of the story. Not the answer. The absence of one. Because somewhere beneath one of the most visited monuments on Earth sits a question nobody can yet resolve. The coordinates exist. The scans exist. For satellite systems reportedly identified the same locations. For generations, engineers and researchers have pointed toward the same possibility. Yet the final confirmation remains out of reach. Between speculation and certainty stand layers of rock, legal restrictions, political realities, funding decisions, and competing interpretations of the evidence. If there truly is a machine beneath Giza, it remains hidden. If there is not, the mystery still remains unsolved. Either way, something beneath the plateau continues to provoke debate, challenge assumptions, and resist easy answers. And until someone finds a way to reach it, the question will remain buried beneath the desert, waiting. If this investigation changed the way you see the pyramids of Giza, share this video with someone who loves ancient mysteries and hidden history. The more people exploring these questions, the harder they become to ignore. And if you're ready to go even deeper, watch the next investigation on your screen now and decide for yourself how much of humanity's past may still be hidden underground. Maybe the scans are wrong. Maybe the chambers don't exist. Maybe everything beneath the pyramids will eventually be explained by geology, physics, and a misunderstanding of the data. Or maybe, beneath the sands of Giza, there is still a chapter of human history waiting to be uncovered. For now, the questions remain unanswered. The structures, if they are real, are still hidden. The debate continues. And the truth sits buried beneath thousands of years of stone, silence, and speculation. But one thing is certain, discoveries like this remind us that history is far from finished. Even at the most studied archaeological site on Earth, there may still be secrets no one expected to find. If you found this investigation fascinating, share this video with someone who loves ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, and unanswered questions. The more people who see this story, the more minds can weigh the evidence and decide for themselves what lies beneath the pyramids. And remember, sometimes the greatest discoveries are not the answers we find, but the questions we refuse to stop asking.